I'm here to shed a little bit of light on a paper we wrote together with several co-authors. Some of them are in the room. Raise your hand, please, if you are. Jules, Ido, Edwin, and several colleagues have promised to join online. So if you're there, thanks so much, everyone, for joining. And we approached the inclusivity question or the responsible innovation question more from an organizational innovation portfolio perspective, and fortunately that fitted well with the scope of the special issue. So we're going to talk about, how do you manage a portfolio of innovations along principles of inclusivity, responsibility. And a portfolio approach basically is that you're intentionally trying to guide your investments in innovation and scaling along your organizational mission. And I want to acknowledge that there's various perspectives on portfolio management, and the two main perspectives are like more organizational perspective versus a sectoral perspective. And it's very much about where you draw the boundaries. Like an organizational perspective tries to manage innovation portfolios within the boundary of the organization. A sectoral perspective tries to manage innovation portfolios at the level of a sector. So you can say, like, in Kenya you have CGIAR and you have tons of other organizations. If we focus only on CGIAR, then you have more your organizational perspective, but if you focus on the Kenyan agri-food system, then you can also use a portfolio perspective at that level. And we did a literature review earlier that showed that innovation portfolio management is very much underutilized in the public sector, though there's a lot of experiences from private sector that we could actually build on. And what we learned also from that review was that, and I didn't really expect that, to be honest, but that portfolio management is very much a matter of methods. So, collecting specific types of information, using data systems for that, incentive mechanism, but also very much about mindset. And I think in introduction that was already said, like the roots of that plant that you showed in your presentation, that is very much like where the culture and the community and the capacity is rooted for more inclusive, responsible innovation. So this operationalizes a little bit, and we use this as a conceptual framework in our publication. So you, on the right-hand side of this graph, you have your innovation portfolio management ambition. So what do you want your innovation portfolio to actually do? Is it achieving the sustainable development goals? Is it to optimize profit? Depending on your organizational context, that can change. And then if you go more towards the left-hand side, you see the 3 M's, the methods, mindsets, mechanisms, and then specific design elements that need to be there for innovation portfolio management to actually function. Why innovation portfolio management? So yesterday in our session, I also used a big box of Lego and turned it upside down and said, like, well, if you now all of a sudden people ask you, like, what are your transport innovations? What are your gender innovations? What are your business model innovations? What are your drought-tolerant maize variety innovations? Like, there's a lot of searching. And I don't mind doing that, like, over the weekend with my kids, but in an organizational setting, if you get an email on Sunday evening where the DG is asking, like, what are we doing on drought-tolerant crops in Mexico, that's like a different ballgame. So we all work in organizations where we don't just manage like one innovation, but we manage thousands. And how can we not only get better overview, but also nurture these kinds of innovation and scaling trajectories along principles of, let's say, inclusivity, responsibility, but also efficiency and being impactful. So it's about tracking progress at the portfolio level, but also about nurturing. It's not just about, like, we want to see whether something is ready for scaling, yes or no, but we also want to support these kinds of processes. And ultimately, that can help us to prioritize our investments. So if we have overview and shows that our portfolio is very irresponsible in terms of what we are doing, or like focusing a lot on sustainable things, then we can course correct if we have that kind of information. And that can also help us in doing our risk management at the organizational level and to identify critical gaps that we need to mobilize resources around. So as we said, like we took more of a responsibility angle in the paper, and there are emerging, I would say, responsibility aspects that we can integrate when we think about innovation portfolios. So I think one of the first things, and we'll see that from the Mentimeter, that comes to many people's mind is maybe gender equality and social inclusion. And I guess many of us in the room will already like take a little bit of a broader intersectionality approach, where we also consider, for example, literacy or distance from the market or abilities, capacities, education levels. So all kinds of diversity elements that can play a role on whether people have access and can benefit from innovation in the first place. It doesn't always matter whether you're a man or a woman, or whether you're young or old. Sometimes how close you are to a market may actually make a much better, a much bigger impact. So that as a starting point. But the responsibility issue can also include unintended consequences. I think we can all think of innovations that, you know, looked pretty cool and were very useful until they got used at scale, and where then that led to massive greenhouse gas emissions or losses of biodiversity or widening income gaps, maybe as an unintended consequence. Inclusive decision making, so it's not just about like having an overview of the portfolio, but also who drives, where the money goes to. Are those the funders? Are those leadership in our organization? Or are those the clients that we actually work for? Or are there models where we do that in a somehow inclusive and participatory way? Working in demand-driven and user-centered ways, so for example, making sure that our innovation teams are diverse, both in terms of scientific disciplines, but also, you know, people that know policy, people that know the reality on the ground, so that we do everything possible to make sure that the innovations actually respond to real demand, and are not just like a great idea thought of by a scientist that for which there is no demand or doesn't solve a tangible problem. Innovation portfolio management is also very much about responsible use of resources. Like, can we justify why we prioritize some things over others? And for that, you need to have some level of overview. And last but not least, making sure that our investments in innovation and scaling are sustainable. So we take systems approaches, that we use our investments to catalyze, and that we don't have, we spoke about it in the previous session, projectitis, you know, where project after project after project, and when the project stops, there's no continuity, everything collapses, partnerships, gaps in the innovation development trajectories, etc. So there's a lot of responsibility aspects that we can use when we manage a portfolio. In 2021, as part of the research and innovation strategy and the performance and results management framework that CGIAR developed, it started to embrace more evidence-based innovation management, and it's very much based on principles of scaling readiness approach, which tries to track and support innovation readiness and innovation use in an evidence-based way. So again, as I said, it's not just tracking, it's also very much nurturing innovations along this idea to impact pathway. So the focus is like performance and results management. There's a technical reporting arrangement, and at the moment, the innovation portfolio management approach focuses on approximately 30 to 40% of the CGIAR portfolio. And that's going to increase, spoiler alert. There's a digital ecosystem that makes sure that we can collect all these kinds of information. There's people trained that support the collection of that kind of information and the nurturing aspects. And there's a lot of effort going into strategic communication and engagement to work, you know, internally and externally with partners and CGIAR centers to actually mainstream this. So where are we currently? So you remember the Lego pile that I showed in the beginning of the slide. I think we've made some progress, and there's a little bit more order. So we have approximately 1,000 innovations on which we have basic information, including some responsibility and inclusivity data, and I will show later. 200 innovations are mapped along standardized metrics that are in use. We have 100 people trained internally, some also externally. We have 50 innovation packages designed, and innovation packages is very much about putting innovations into a specific scaling context. We have 40 innovation management reports delivered, so these provide overviews to decision makers. And we have 10 scaling strategies for our star innovations under development. So I just want to give you an idea of the type of insights we can now provide at the portfolio level. So we have much better idea of where innovations are in terms of their readiness. Are they still at an ID stage? Are they undergoing basic research, proof of concept, or are they being tested? And if they are tested, in what kind of conditions? And this is very important because we don't want to scale innovations prematurely. That's also a responsibility aspect. If we start scaling things that are not proven to work, we basically transfer the innovation risk from us as an organization to farmers. And there's unfortunately too many cases of where that has happened. On the right-hand side, you can see some trend data where we now know how innovations have evolved over time. And you can see that most of them actually increase in terms of readiness, but sometimes innovations also decrease in terms of readiness. We have better idea of where innovation development is taking place, where there's heavy investment, where there's maybe a little bit less investment. We have better ideas about risk-reward mechanisms. So what does our portfolio look like in terms of incremental versus more radical and disruptive innovation? And you can ask ourselves the question, like, is an organization like CGI, are we happy with that kind of division of like 70, 20, 10, more or less distribution across these risk profiles? We have idea about like what it takes to scale innovations in specific contexts with partners. On the left-hand side, you see what we call an innovation package. The green dot is basically the readiness and use of the core innovation, which in this case is participatory rangeland management. And all of the other dots in this graph represent enabling conditions that need to be there for a system to actually embrace participatory rangeland management. So this can be policy, market, finance, mindset, behavioral, social innovations that need to be all working together for change to happen. SDG focus is of course an important one for CGIAR to show like how is our investment targeting different sustainable development goals. And I included two key responsibility metrics. So one is, for example, what kind of actions are being taken to avoid unintended consequences. We have this information for all these 1,000 innovations that we have in our database. And we can see like whether people like in some cases people feel like, this doesn't apply to me. So it's quite interesting, like, or maybe it's too early in the process to start considering these things. But we are also very much interested in like when people feel that unintended consequences could be happening, like what kind of actions are they taking. On the right-hand side is some information we are collecting on diverse teams. We know from literature that diverse innovation teams usually come up with better solutions. So we also started tracking that, and if people say like, yes, we are conscious about diversity, then what kind of diversity are they actually trying to bring into their teams? For the first time in CGIAR history, we are also capturing why innovations are being stopped or put on hold. And it's very interesting. Sometimes it's because we cannot make them proven to work, which is in a scientific process very normal. But we seem to have some sort of allergy in the system, towards embracing that kind of failure. In other cases, it's like merging, which is also very interesting, of course, because that's usually where bundling and synergies are starting to exist. In some cases, it's about resource limitations that require prioritization. So if you're interested in diving deeper in some of these data and metrics, then feel free to visit our results dashboard. It has dedicated pages on innovation development, innovation use. We can share the link, but also if you are very quick, you can actually take a picture and access it through the QR code. Now, if we analyze our progress, and I'm going back to this graph, in the paper we noticed that like in some areas, the status or the progress is better than in others. Where we are particularly need to make steps is, getting clearer guidance on, what are some of the criteria that we assess the portfolio against. So, for example, I showed this 70, 20, 10 in terms of incremental, radical, and disruptive innovation. We don't really have a benchmark from senior leadership that says like, oh, actually, we would like to be more of a 60, 30 10 organization. And as long as you don't have that kind of benchmark criteria, you cannot really manage your innovation portfolio against it. So you cannot really course correct. So that is a discussion that needs to be taking place. And there's other areas, on culture and capacity, we're making progress, but we're not there yet. And events like, this week, having a group of people together, they definitely help a lot. So critical next steps. So the spoiler alert was, yes, we're moving beyond the pooled portfolio. There's a working group that Jules is leading that works on harmonized results reporting. And innovation reporting and is definitely one of the minimum data requirements that is also going to be tracked across non-pooled bilateral project moving forward. As I said, like engaging leadership in defining a clearer ambition and then managing against that. Connecting our CGIAR portfolio to that of others. On Monday we had a great convening, and I see several familiar faces in the room where we also had discussions on, how can we link what we do to what other organizations do, the FAOs, other CGIAR organizations working on innovation and scaling, etc. And then like continued impact culture growth. This morning we spoke, for example, about like how do you change the internal incentive systems of CGIAR that help people to think more impact oriented rather than, I need to write 5 papers this year, otherwise I may not get my promotion. Like how can we maybe incentivize writing 1 paper and then taking the innovation to the next level? So there's all kinds of deeper institutional changes that need to happen for us to become more efficient. And then hopefully we can move towards building the Lego house together. Thank you.